Today we're going to give you a comprehensive look at patch 14.21, Riot's reasoning for the patch and our thoughts on it from the prospect. This is the full patch note. Let's go through the points one by one to understand Riot's intentions and check off each one. First, the bounty. The most important point about bounties is that they are earned by the difference in gold, not by strict kills. To put it simply, this eliminates the unreasonable bounty of 150 gold for a lucky triple kill on a teammate who previously had 0 kills and 10 deaths. The bounty amounts were too high for the disparity, and we've also made improvements in that area so one mistake can no longer easily turn the game around. Here's nerf list. Aurelion Sol. Nerfed starting health and E-skill. Riot tries to counter the power of the early game of champions who build up their stacks to facilitate the late game. This is certainly a valid reason, and we don't think it's fair for Sol to feel rushed from the start of the game. Brand nerfed mana regenerate, passive damage, and Q mana cost. This is a nerf that definitely snipes at supporters who play without mana items. Camille received nerfs to all of her health, W, E, and R skills. Riot's thinking was that Camille's damage was too much for any champion. Wonder if weakness in her line would help, as it's tricky to deal with from a main carry standpoint when you have the same growth. Elise. Simple nerfs for tuning. Fiddlestick. Nerfed Q for Fiddlestick strength at low elo. Galio. This is an up-and-coming power that has caught the attention of worlds. The mana nerf has indirectly impacted his sustain in lane, but the tier remains to be seen. Gwen, adjustments for late game overbalance and a coefficient nerf to make item builds more sustainable. Hui, he's a hard character to control and his strengths are becoming more apparent as people get better. Hui's strength was being able to keep sitting out of range and they nerfed him because they thought that was a strong point. Kai'Sa, carry champions who are not affected by AD item nerfs. Riot nerfed him to match while also nerfing his supporters to fit the meta a bit. Karthus, magic resistance received an across-the-board nerf, reducing its power to rising champions. Kassadin. This is the exact nerf that nerfs the power we saw in Worlds. Riot wants to counteract early game power at a point where it should be weak. Nasus has been pretty strong since the 14.19 gold nerf, and even as a growth champion he has too much sustain in the early game to warrant a nerf. Senna, simple nerfs for tuning. Taric, a simple nerf to adjust for statistically strong supporters. Viego also gets simple nerfs for tuning. Volibear nerfed Rod of Age and Nabori item build strands that lead to ease unstoppability. In the smaller fights, this build were really strong. Yon is still the reigning tier 1 champion in mid. Riot nerfed W because they wanted to make it more close combat, but the reality is that it's more destructive in game. It needs more nerfs. Yorick nerf for low elo. Next, the buff list. Azir, making him a more difficult champion to handle due to skill issues at low elo except at high elo. Corki, seeing the point of the W buff, Riot buffs Corki once again. Passive WR all buffs should be able to revive him and make him look good again. The pre-level 13 weakness combined with the AD item nerf made Gangplank too weak. E-cooldown buffs for powers before level 13. Mid Irelia was too reliant on first core, so Riot buffed it by taking more points early in the game. Having more action options for Irelia is a nice buff. Kayla is a scaling champion, but her sustain in lane was too broken, so Riot buffed her W mana. Malphite were less valuable than Riot thought. This is a simple buff to adjust. Nyla received a lot of love for her smoothness of control after the buffs in the last patch. Riot has released another patch to make her even smoother by increasing her utility. In specific compositions, I think it could be used in the pro scene. Kiana. She's an assassin champion that doesn't really capitalize on his strengths in lane, so Riot buffed her accordingly. Sivir is a rare laner in the meta these days. Riot buffed her to emphasize her strengths in lane. From a draft wise, I think she'll be good enough to make it to tier 1. Talon is similar to Kiana's idea. Riot buffed him to make his more of a strength in the lane while also closing the value gap with other mid champions. Teemo. Riot gave speed related buffs that fit the character concept. Last buff champion is Xayah. This buff is intended to fill the gap in dealing caused by the item nerf. The champion to be changed is Swain. Despite the various patches Riot made, Swain still have a low pick rate. The strength of the liner itself is still lacking compared to other champions. As for items, Sorcerer's Boots and Blade of the Ruined were overrated compared to other priced items, so Riot nerfed them accordingly. And Lethal Tempo, an underutilized buff for melee champions, has been buffed. That concludes our review of the 14.21 patch notes. Next up, we'll be back with our special 14.21 Korean Pro tier list. If you helpful this video, please subscribe.